I've seen some really interesting things that I find really effective in some scenarios, like the stand-up meeting, which I used to do in when I was doing software development. I would have our team would stand up and we would have a 15-minute run through in the mornings of here's the basics of what everybody's working on. No one elaborated overly, but it was a chance to say, hey, I'm looking for assistance on this, or this is holding me up, so that other people could kind of contribute where it was needed. That has been a successful tool in the past. Right now, I find weekly meetings are quite sufficient for the team, but we have daily lunch, and lunch is just that chance to connect. And very often, even though we might be talking about completely random things, often little things and clarifications come in really subtle moments. And just being around each other and spending time in casual environment can really aid that communication quite a bit.
It's usually pretty casual. I find that in an office setting, it's easy to have a lot of formal meetings, and they kind of pile up and they kind of eat up your calendar. So if you have an informal meeting, even where people are just kind of standing, because if people are standing, it's going to be a lot shorter than if everyone's sitting down. So that's a good way to do the weekly meeting. And I find having an informal meeting for that kind of weekly meeting also makes it a lot more comfortable for people. Ultimately, you want your team to be comfortable saying this isn't a good idea or this is a good idea. As a leader, it's vital that you listen to your people, both literally listen to them, because I think we're often distracted by other things, email, social media, and sometimes it's hard to just set everything aside and say I'm listening to you 100%. So you have to literally listen to your team, but also metaphorically in the sense of you have to listen to their ideas, you have to listen to their contributions, and the reason you have a team, I mean, you're not a one-person show. And the reason you have a team is because you have different people with skill sets who can contribute. And so that's important as a leader to be able to hear people's contributions and say, you know what, maybe the way we're doing it is not the best. Maybe we could do it another way. And a weekly kind of informal meeting I find is a good setting for encouraging that kind of input and feedback. If you have a more formal setting where there's an agenda and there is a time and place for those kind of meetings, but I find certain people are maybe reluctant to say, especially in a larger group of people, actually, I don't think this is a great idea. So the informal team meeting has worked really well for us to kind of manage weekly tasks.
We have what I call a daily stand-up meeting. So no sittings involved. You have 30 seconds to tell us what you did in the last 24 hours, what you're doing in the next 24 hours, and what do you need help with. And everybody goes around the circle and talks about what they're doing, and it just allows everybody to get on the same page. I know what Paul's doing, I know what Steve's doing, they all know what I'm doing. And more importantly, what do I need help with? It allows people to kind of grow, tap into other people's resources. But something that takes us 5 minutes a day probably saves us, countless minutes in terms of conflict that did not arise, deadlines that weren't met because we just took the time to communicate.